The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Each year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up according to the festival custom. After they had completed its days, as they were returning, the boy Jesus remained behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Thinking he was in the caravan, they journeyed for a day and looked for him among their relatives and acquaintances, but not finding him, they returned to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were astounded at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Son, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been looking for you with great anxiety." And he said to them, "Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" But they did not understand what he said to them. He went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. And his mother kept all these things in her heart. And Jesus advanced in wisdom and age and favor before God and man. The Gospel of the Lord. So happy Holy Family Sunday. It seems to me that this feast of the Holy Family could not be more exquisitely positioned on the calendar just after Christmas, which tends to bring out both the very best and perhaps the not so best in family experiences, and of course just before New Year's, the time for making resolutions, a moment to examine in our own life personally and our own family life and resolve to perhaps mend, to heal, to fix, to repair, to restore whatever might be broken or wounded or failing or just missing in family life. So, if anyone here is part of a perfect family, which doesn't need any healing or work to be done, would you please stand up now so that the rest of us can celebrate that there is a perfect family somewhere out there. My sister and my brother-in-law are here in the first row, and they're not standing up. And I'm only standing up because I have to. So it's not surprising. The reality of imperfect family life was brought home to us the other night when we were together on Christmas night at about 8 p.m. when 2 Suffolk police officers showed up at my youngest brother's house because one of his kids, one of our nephews, who's been a little estranged from his family, just to annoy them, he called the police to do a wellness check, or really a wellness annoyance, to make his point. The police could not have been nicer and more understanding. So certainly not a perfect family. But overall, Christmas was a great time to be together, even though in my family and perhaps in your family, there's always more work, more healing to be done within this imperfect human family that we are all part of. So the question is, were we a holy family? Were we a holy family with a sort of a rush grace and not so holy thoughts during that evening? Well, yes, we were. Not because we had our religious or our family act together, not because things worked out perfectly, but because God has been born again among us in the family, among us in the world, into the human family, with all its complications and ambiguities, the holy reality, the holy mess of human life that we see beautifully cleaned up in the manger in front of the altar. So a sober look at the gospel for today will help us to keep from romanticizing and sentimentalizing today's feast with the three people upon whom this famous story is based. The story of Jesus being lost in the temple, one of Mary's first sorrows. So Jesus' family has come to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. Jesus had separated himself from the company of his parents, not a very considerate thing, of the son of Mary and Joe. There's an obvious note of annoyance and hurt in Mary's question to Jesus, "Son, why have you done this?" And how many mothers here haven't said that to a son or a daughter? And it's ironic that Jesus' first words in the Gospel of Luke should sound like a reprimand from the Son of God to his parents. "Why were you looking for me? Didn't you know? Didn't you know the whole picture? Didn't you know that I must be in my Father's house?" He could have added, "I hope he didn't call the Jerusalem police department or the temple guard." He had decided to do something without the courtesy, perhaps without the courtesy of asking his parents' permission. And so the story tells us that Jesus was 12 years old. This was the age when Jewish boys prepare for their bar mitzvah, when they accept their religious responsibilities, and they think about their life journey, similar but not identical to confirmation. Jesus is showing signs of his independence and his compulsion for God, which will characterize his adult life. But his parents have no way of knowing at that point what form his later life will take. Parents don't. All they know is that Jesus, their son, had separated himself from them. So this trip, this journey to Jerusalem, prefigures much of his future. And at the same time, this story suggests that most family life is similar to one degree or another. Jesus won't follow the usual path into his father's line of work, of carpentry. He won't, as would have been expected then, to stay in his hometown among his kinsfolk. He's engaged in this discussion with teachers in the temple, which portends his own teaching role later on in life. So this moment in Jerusalem foreshadows Jesus' later journey there with his disciples, with his new family, the disciples and all those who follow him. As time goes on, he'll reveal more about himself. But his parents don't understand now. They don't understand what he's saying to them about the priority of his relationship to God, which takes precedence even over his relationship to them. Jesus' later life will reveal that being a part of his family, of which we are all a part, has not necessarily anything to do with blood, but having faith in him. And Mary is showing the signs of a true believer as she kept all these things in her heart. Over the last couple of weeks, you may remember that Pat, our music director, sang that beautiful song, "Mary, Did You Know?" Mary, did you know? Well, she didn't have a crystal ball, and she doesn't understand how God's plan will be worked out in Jesus. And so she has to do what we have to do as disciples, and that is to ponder, to wait, and to pray. To think, to ponder, to reflect, and to pray. And so understanding the consequences of Jesus' birth into our human family isn't easy. It's a lifelong journey. It wasn't easy for Mary and Joseph, and it's not easy for us now. As a family of faith, we need to ask, what are the consequences of professing faith as followers of Jesus? And while Mary and Joseph don't get a completely clear response or understanding from Jesus, what do? They hang in there. They stay around to see, to grow with Jesus. And as the end of the gospel says, they went back to Nazareth. He grew in wisdom, age, and favor. And so must we, as we profess our faith these days again in the newborn Savior. Going forward, in subsequent weeks, we'll hear the stories of the adult Christ who will invite others to become part of his family again. Flawed and yet imperfect though we are, we want to hear again and to ponder his words and actions and determine what are the consequences for us in being disciples in Jubilee year 2025. As to his parents, we're here today and stay around to continue, like Mary, to keep all these realities in our hearts, to grow in wisdom, age, and grace ourselves. The grace and the good news in the midst of all of this is that Jesus stays with them. Jesus stays with us. He doesn't throw his hands up and try to find another set of parents, a mom and dad, who would understand him perfectly, because nobody did. But he stays with us too, even when we don't get it. And we'll be hearing more stories this liturgical year of St. Luke from stories about people who are continually missing the point. Even Peter, James, and John, missing the point, getting distracted. And Jesus stays with them through it all. These are our stories, and this is the story of the church. When I was younger, my sister Eileen will remember this, when the kids got older, we always went to Mass on Sunday at St. Mary's in Manhasset, and we would sit, because there was 12 of us, we would sit together and in two rows, and I remember the pastor there, who was not the nicest guy in the world, very good person, but not the very, very tough guy, and he would describe the Holy Family as this beautiful, idyllic family life. And I remember looking at some, and this is not our family. But looking at the readings about that we hear today really are a reminder to us, because the family, they came to Jerusalem for the Passover. They went to their synagogue every week in Nazareth, and they lived basic family life, focusing upon God, focusing upon schoolwork and work and meals together. But it wasn't always peaceful and tranquil 2,000 years ago, nor is it any time in between. Even amid the pressures that our culture puts on family life, we too struggle to focus upon God, and families struggle to make this pilgrimage. You've made this pilgrimage here each week to the table of the Lord, where God feeds us on his word and nourishes on the Eucharist. But the fact is that the Bible is interestingly filled with explicit mention of imperfect families, filled with stories, both in the New Testament and the Old Testament. Cain kills Abel. David lusts after Bathsheba and arranges for her husband's death, marries her. Joseph's brothers sell him into slavery. St. Joseph himself contemplates divorcing Mary when he learns she's pregnant. And later on in Jesus' life, his family comes and they're trying to take him away because they say he's out of his mind. Family life, real life, human life. So holding up the notion of an ideal family, can tend to disillusion us, but we have to work on it each day. And let's invite imperfect families, all of us, into the bigger story. And the bigger story is the story of salvation. It is a story of restoration and redemption, and that God is showing others about life to our imperfect human families. So it's interesting that this story about Jesus getting lost in the temple only comes up once every 3 years in Luke's cycle. Seems to me it should come up a lot often, at least in my family. But anyway, happy Holy Family Day as we celebrate that God is with us in the midst of our families, and we are called to be his brothers and sisters, to bring his life, his new life, to the world as he comes to dwell among us again.